Good morning and welcome to our March 20th, 2025 Law and Regulatory Committee meeting. I'll now call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. We'll start off with Councilmember Mendoza.
Here.
And Vice Mayor Albert.
Here.
Thank you.
I'd like to call upon our Fire Chief, Chief Harrigan, to lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. At this time, I'll open up the meeting to public comment and have anyone who wishes to come forward to speak on any items not on today's agenda. Seeing none, I will close public comment. We'll move on to item 5 on today's agenda, the approval of the minutes from September of 26th. Are there any revisions or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to recommend approving those minutes.
Yes, at this time, the City Council will consider approving the minutes from the last meeting for September 26, 2024. If I can get a motion to approve.
I move.
Second.
With the motion on the floor with the second, we'll start a roll call with Councilmember Mendoza.
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Albert.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6 today, and we will hear from our new Government Relations Manager, Rob Becerra, with some updates on state and federal priority legislation. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Chairman Donza and Vice Mayor Alvord. Thank you for having us today for the first LNR committee meeting of the year. I'm joined at the staff table by two individuals you'll hear from a little bit later, our housing manager, Tricia Isom, and our assistant IT director, Jesse Rivera. Moving on, next slide. I'm going to go over a high-level kind of landscape view of the legislative session as we see it right now. We'll discuss legislative themes, some important deadlines, and then the city's advocacy priorities at the state and federal level. With the 2-year legislative cycle starting now, we see shifting policy trends, some state budget concerns, and it just highlights the criticality of staying engaged at this point at the state and federal level. We'll also discuss just the city's strategic approach as we move forward. In the 2025 session, we saw 2,350 bills introduced. This was slightly up from last year. There was a move in the Senate and Assembly to reduce the number of bills coming out of each house, moving from 35 bills per legislature in the Assembly down from 50, and then 35 bills in the Senate down from 40. We did note 37% of the total bills introduced are spot or intent bills, so they lack significant detail and likely will be evolving as we go through the legislative year. So certainly just those intent bills and spot bills are something that we'll continue to track. This year, we're going to just very high level some of the key dates for legislation. Obviously, February 21st was the last day for bills to be introduced into the Senate and Assembly. Late March, so about now, committee hearings are ramping up. And the first real significant deadline is June 6th, where legislation has to move from one house to the next. That is one of the critical times when we get that really good snapshot of what we see moving forward with support from both sides. We have representatives from each city department who make up what we call our citywide government relations team. These individuals, some of whom are in the audience today, they take that first view of legislation that could potentially impact their department. We view them as the subject matter experts within each department, and then they help prioritize what we see as priority legislation, specifically on the state side, as we move forward. As I mentioned, some of the themes that we see for the year is likely, or I should say, Legislative Analyst's Office estimates somewhere between a $20 to $30 billion budget deficit, which could have striking impacts on all of our municipal services, just depending on how the governor and the legislature decide to manage that budget. We see some significant movement, obviously, coming from the LA fires with wildfire mitigation, 90-plus bills just focusing on prevention, funding, and fire hazard zone mapping, which you will certainly hear a lot more about in the coming weeks and months. And then renewed focus on housing and tech regulations, again, attempting to solve the housing affordability crisis, the lack of housing that potentially exists, and then strong several bills on AI governance and data privacy. I'm going to highlight 3 bills that just very broadly represent some of the things that we're seeing. SB 346, again, discussing not so much on the housing element, but this is something specific to short-term rentals. And the way that we perceive this written is specific to, if you like, Airbnbs or short-term rentals. There is a little carve-out that it could potentially be for single rate occupancy hotels that kind of fit that bridge between, like a Motel 6, but it's not an Airbnb. It gives municipalities potentially the opportunity to apply a transient occupancy tax on those, but it also works through a permitting process where we would know throughout the city who has a registered rental in that space, again, Airbnb short-term rentals. So it's just something we're tracking right now, again, to see the impacts, but also to see what the workload would look like as we try to manage that. SB 569. This is an interesting bill that we'll likely move to a support position on, but it mandates that local municipalities and Caltrans work together to coordinate encampment cleanups. This has been a pinch point where jurisdictional boundaries prevent us from entering Caltrans property to do cleanup and under very specific elements, something, there's a fire hazard or something to that effect. This bill would provide that bridge for municipalities and Caltrans to clean up that property, or at least give us the ability to clean up that property in a more expeditious fashion. And then the last bill I highlight is SB 603, Property Tax Relief for Disaster Victims. I'm highlighting this one, because it is from our local senator, Senator Nielo, but it provides individuals the ability to transfer their property tax rate if their home was damaged from it has to be a declared disaster, a significant disaster, within the same county. And I highlight this because Placer County is very big. We have a lot of wildland fire areas, and the unfortunate chance that we would have a large-scale fire, potentially somewhere up in the Sierras or Tahoe National Forest, could potentially present several homes being destroyed. Those individuals would have rights to move their property taxes, say, if they wanted to relocate to Sun City, Roseville. So something we're tracking, again, just to see the long-term impacts, but potentially some reduction in property taxes if this bill were to move into effect. So again, something we're watching. Moving on to discuss what's happening at the federal level. Federally directed spending or earmarks, that process or window, which is very short, is currently open right now, and applications, final applications, are due by Friday to Congressman Kiley's office. We have, I should say, we floated 4 projects to the congressman, and it's likely that at least 3 will move forward. One from the police department seeking some support for our EOD explosive ordnance device team, so a bomb truck and robot, and that's a joint project with Roseville and Rockland. And something you'll hear a little bit more about, but a cybersecurity project to support some cybersecurity initiatives at the federal level. And Jesse may touch on that in just a moment. So we're moving those 2 projects forward, along with something that Noel may mention, which is an environmental utilities project that's a joint project with Roseville and PCWA. At this stage in the cycle, we're finalizing our applications, finalizing letters of support, getting everything submitted with hopefully a successful delivery of all of our applications into Kylie's office by the deadline 5 p.m. Tomorrow. We will, again, continue to advocate with the Congressman's office on those as well. With that, I'm going to turn over, I'll do a little intro first, which is on April 7th through the 11th, the city has our annual federal advocacy trip planned. We are bringing a team back this year to talk about priority issues, specifically around public works, infrastructure, transportation, our utility, our environmental utilities team and our electric team also going back. And we are also bringing 2 individuals, one from housing, Tricia, and Say from our IT department to talk about cybersecurity and IT. So I wanted to take a moment to turn it over to them to talk just a little bit about what some of the information that their departments are bringing back to the federal advocacy trip. So with that, I'll turn it over to our housing manager, Tricia Isom.
Thank you. Good morning. So interestingly enough, my talking points for this advocacy trip are changing kind of on a daily basis. As you may know, if you're following the news, every time I get another newspaper article or sometimes hear from HUD directly. So last year, I made requests to increase funding for all of our programs and gave information as to what we would do and how many people we could assist. This year, my refrain will be more, please don't cut my programs. Please keep funding as it is. We did receive some positive information with the signing of the continuing resolution early this week, late last week. Funding for HUD programs, they're stating will be at approximately fiscal year 2024 levels. The HCB budget was increased by about $7 billion overall. It sounds like a lot, but it's not when you're talking about the entire nation. So even with this small increase this year, the Housing Authority is still in shortfall already as of March 2025. So we are monitoring our budget very, very closely. If we do meet with HUD, I know, Rob and the team are trying to get meetings with everybody. I will be asking about there's a new regulation. It's called HOTMA. It's Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act. It's a new regulation that's supposed to go into effect in July of 2025. It significantly changes the way that the Housing Authority calculates resident income, and it's to the benefit of our residents, which is great because it allows them to pay a little less based on how we calculate their income. The problem is that it increases the Housing Authority's portion, and if we're already in shortfall, it's going to create a bigger issue with our budget by the end of the year. We don't want to have to take people's vouchers away. So, with all the changes and everything, my big question is HOTMA still going to be a thing? Is that still going through in July? When it comes to CDBG, again, with the continuing resolution, it looks like we will be at 2024 levels, which is it's not great because it's not increasing, but it's not being cut. So that's exciting. I did just hear from HUD directly earlier this month that our emergency housing vouchers, which you may remember from 2021 during the pandemic, we received 50 emergency housing vouchers. Funding for that program was supposed to last through 2035. We just received notification that more than likely the funding, we're going to be getting our final tranche of funding this April, and it will probably last us, maybe if we're smart with our money, through the end of 2026. So it's going to be, we currently have 37 folks leased up through the EHV program, and we have to figure out how we're going to continue to assist people after 2026. So looking at funding for that, and again, something else I want to talk to HUD about. I think that's it for me. Sorry it wasn't more positive.
Next, we'll turn it over to Jesse Rivera, is the Assistant Director in IT.
Great. Thank you, Rob. And good morning. So I'll cover 4 quick things that are on the horizon for IT. One is the continued funding of Department of Homeland Security and CISA cybersecurity efforts. Roseville and agencies like us subscribe to critical DHS services that really greatly increase our cybersecurity posture here at the city. If we were to replace these services on our own, the cost would be about $250,000 annually to the city. And that excludes crisis management, which we do rely on the federal government for in the event of a big cybersecurity issue. We do have resources there that we can go to for assistance. I think the most critical piece of this is if we do not replace these services, then our cybersecurity exposure is at risk, and a successful cyber attack against the city would come with a huge significant cost to the city. The next one is broadband. Broadband's critical for everything these days: education, healthcare, employment, all our daily activities. We want to advocate for the continued funding of broadband initiatives, and more importantly, find creative ways to secure broadband funding for Roseville. Our specific need comes, one of our specific needs is with adventure clubs, and they serve about 3,000 school-aged children per year. Next topic is artificial intelligence, which I'm sure we've all heard about. It's a force across industries, but our stance is it needs to be carefully managed. So we want to push for the continued advancement of AI, increasing efficiency, but also balancing ethical processes and data security. And lastly is ADA compliance, or more specifically, digital ADA compliance. By April of 2026, all publicly available digital content must be ADA compliant. This is a huge impact for the city because we do have a large volume of digital content out there available to the public. Our website's obviously publicly available, but almost every department has systems that are also available to the public for recreation management, utility billing, just to name a few, but it does impact across the board. So we want to, we're working on all of these efforts and are positive about our ability to meet that deadline, but we do want to go and speak about the setting reasonable timelines and expectations.
With that, I just wanted to provide a snapshot for the rest of the LNR calendar year. We assessed how often the LNR committee meets and are deciding to try a quarterly schedule. We felt like that really hit on our legislative milestones, and we'd be able to bring back significant updates at each of those meetings. So there's our outlook for our schedule for the year, and just on a very high-level schedule, what you would expect to hear from us at each of those milestones along the way. With that, back to you, sir, if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Rob. Vice Mayor, any questions?
No, thank you for the reports.
I had a couple questions. So, Trish, on the emergency housing vouchers, since it's now the funding on that's been accelerated to possibly 26 being the sunset, does that mean that we'll be no longer accepting new applications to try to keep as much money as we can for the existing?
Yes, and so a little bit more background on that. We got the EHV vouchers in 2021. We, in the very beginning, we knew that as of September 30th of 2023, we were not allowed to continue to lease or release any vouchers that became available. So since end of September 2023, we have not leased any new vouchers. So we had 50 at that time, and it's slowly been dwindling down. We knew that the program was going to end sooner rather than later. It was not a permanent thing, although we've been pressing for it to be permanent. So we have not been leasing since late 2023. So that's why instead of having 50 right now, we only have 37. So they do go off the program. They find other housing, they move other places. Sometimes people pass away, things like that happen. So we are slowly but surely seeing people leave that program. So it will continue to happen. Just, I don't think we're going to lose 37 in the next 2 years. So, but again, we are looking at other funding sources. I know the state is, I saw an article from the state of California. They're worried. They're saying, we're going to have so many more homeless people in California. What can we do? So I'm thinking, applying for funds in the future from the state. There's a lot of different options. So I'm looking at everything right now.
It is such a success story. It is sad to hear that news, especially knowing all the hard work that you and your team have put into that over the years.
Well, and the fact, the fact that we leased all of these folks directly from homelessness, we can't return them to homelessness.
Right.
We're not going to do that. So
That's a bad alternative. Yeah. And then I had a question on the IT side. So for our viewers at home, what are some examples of a digital ADA update?
So a good example is alternative text. So if you're visually impaired and there's the browsers will read the content to you, but if there's a picture, it doesn't know how to read that picture. So you insert alternative text, which describes the picture and allows the reader to translate for the visually impaired. That's an example. Colors, fonts, all of those things come into play. There's a long list of things that require ADA compliance or that you have to meet to be ADA compliant from a digital perspective. It also includes files, videos, photos. It's a large scope.
Wow, it's quite a lift. And what was the date this was?
April 2026.
Okay,
I do have a couple questions, too.
thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. That prompted a couple questions. Are we using chat boxes, and are those challenging to meet the requirements on our website?
We are using them. One based in Roseville, which is obviously publicly available. There is a chat bot. It can be as complex as anything else. I don't know that it's any more complex, but we do have a contract with the vendor, and I've started working with them on any changes that need to be made from a Roseville perspective, but also with the chat bot specifically.
Okay, we definitely want to keep Roseville, so
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear
yes.
that. And then I did have a housing question. I know last night at the council meeting, we had heard from a couple parents around specific housing for adults with developmental disabilities who, have caregivers that are aging. And I'm wondering if the city is looking at any of that special, particularly that special population as we're looking at housing needs.
absolutely. So we do have mainstream vouchers, which are for folks that are aged 18 to 62 with a permanent disability. They are absolutely able to apply for a mainstream voucher. That waiting list is always open. Our mainstream vouchers we only have 43, and they are, currently all full. But I am working with that group, and I am connecting them with different groups in the area, our local COC. And then I'm trying to remember Alta Regional. They came to me recently with some ideas about creating housing and working directly with developers and funding, kind of set aside funds for specific units at brand new apartment complexes and things like that. So there's a lot of irons in the fire about that right now.
Okay.
Absolutely. They're a very organized group, and they're wonderful. I enjoy meeting with them.
I'm really happy to hear that we're looking at that. And I assume that part of that is looking at other cities that maybe have successful models and how we might be able to apply some of that here.
There are very few. It's something that I think that's why this group continues to come to Roseville, because they know that we're pro-housing and we're very good at developing, or not developing, but allowing development and encouraging development. And so they continue to come to us because they want us to be a trendsetter.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'll open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, we will move on to item 6.2 and receive updates from our electric department on their priority legislation. Morning, Amber. Oh, and Noel's come at the same time.
Same time.
All right.
Rob, where are you going?
Well, good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Chairman Donza and Vice Mayor Alvord. Good to see everyone this morning. I wanted to start out electric's legislative and regulatory update with kind of a brief overview of some of the bills that we'll talk about this year that we've been seeing so far introduced. But first I wanted to start, I'll talk a little bit about our Capital Day advocacy, then I will move into state legislation and a few bills that we have there on data centers, battery energy storage facilities, and nuclear generation. And then I'll move to the federal items that we're looking at, including the Circuit Act, the Investing in Our Communities Act of 2025, some info on the LIHEAP, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and then a resolution that we just participated in to address wildfires at the federal level. So first, touching on our state advocacy for Capital Day, this is an annual event that's put on by our trade association, the California Municipal Utilities Association, which is a water and electric joint association. And this year we had Councilmember Rakucci that participated with us as part of the electric and EU opportunity to discuss priority issues for 2025 with our state legislators. And our focus from both the electric and EU perspective really centered around reliability, affordability, and flexibility in meeting state mandates. So these are kind of the core issues for electric and EU. And Capital Day really initiates our annual engagement that continues throughout the year with our legislators, and it's an opportunity for us to proactively support our community and raise awareness of industry issues. So it was a great event that we were able to attend this year. And then just real quick, I wanted to mention that last week I participated in an event down at the Capitol on Friday with our trade association, CMUA, and the Northern California Power Agency, NCPA. And it was a POU 101, so a publicly owned utility 101 staff briefing. So we had a lot of staff from members who sit on the Energy Committee, for example, that come and learn more about what a publicly owned utility is. And we were able to represent Roseville on that panel with the Sacramento Municipal Utility District and the LA Department of Water and Power. So it was a great opportunity to showcase Roseville at the state capitol. We were also able to mention our line workers rodeo that's coming up on Saturday, March 29th, just around the corner here. So again, another opportunity for advocacy last week. Moving on to some of our state bills, the first one that I wanted to talk about was AB 222 by Bauer Cahan, and we have a watch position on this bill. And this deals with requiring data center operators to report annual energy consumption to the California Energy Commission, and this allows the CEC to monitor energy trends and impacts of data centers on California's electric grid. There's really a lot of attention in the legislature this year, as you already heard, on AI and specifically AI-related data centers, given their significant energy use. This bill is attempting to provide more transparency on the energy footprint of AI technologies, while also looking on how costs are passed on to consumers. So while we don't really have a huge influx of data centers coming into Roseville at this time, AB 222 is a step in the right direction for more closely monitoring the impacts of AI technologies and their use on energy, or their energy use and consumption. So we'll continue to watch this bill. The next bill, AB 303 by Addis, we have an opposed unless amended position on this bill. And this bill is related to battery energy storage facilities, and really was introduced based on a recent energy storage facility fire in the Central Coast. You may have seen it on the news down in Moss Landing. And this bill would impact systems storing 200 megawatt hours or more of energy and significantly limits where a battery energy storage system can be located. The bill would require the California Energy Commission, or the CEC, to deny any applications for a battery energy storage system that are pending as of the effective date of this bill. And this bill is an urgency statute, so it would go into effect immediately. So Roseville is working with our trade associations to oppose this bill unless amended. We are concerned that this bill would affect existing projects already in the pipeline, and we're also concerned with the overall precedent of this bill. Really, our concerns stem around the fact that we have climate targets and renewable energy goals to meet in the energy sector, and this bill would essentially take off a resource that we have to use to get to those targets that are required by statute completely off the table because of the broad limits of where a facility could be located. And battery energy storage facilities are expected to be a big part of the clean energy transition. So that's really our main concern and why we're looking at opposing this bill. So we'll continue to keep the committee apprised of our efforts on this. The next bill, AB 305 by Arambula. This bill deals with nuclear energy. And existing law prohibits certifying nuclear power plants in California. New nuclear power, and AB 305 would exempt small modular reactors from that prohibition. It would also require the California Public Utilities Commission to adopt a plan by January of 2028 to increase the procurement of electricity generated from nuclear energy and look at phasing out procurement of electricity generated from natural gas. This nuclear discussion is really more of a statewide discussion. It's not something that we're heavily focused on here in Roseville, but I just did want to bring it to the committee's attention because any new nuclear in California has historically been considered unrealistic, and I think some of that conversation is changing now as we look at meeting the clean energy goals like we talked about on the last few bills. So wanted to just keep the committee updated of the fact that we're watching this bill. Moving on to federal legislation, and a bill that we are supporting is Senate Bill 448, the Credit Incentives for Resilient Critical Utility Infrastructure and Transformers, or Circuit Act. And this bill extends the Advanced Manufacturing Production Credit, 45X, to include distribution transformers. The credit is meant to help incentivize domestic production of distribution transformers, and Roseville has been active in advocating for supply chain solutions for distribution transformers over the past few years. And we view this act as a helpful tool to help bolster domestic production. So we are supporting this bill through our trade association, the American Public Power Association, APPA. The next federal bill that we're also supporting is H.R. 1255. Just as a homeowner could refinance a mortgage when interest rates decline, the ability for local governments to issue tax-exempt advanced refunding bonds captures lower interest rate savings for our community. A law from a few years ago maintained the tax exemption for municipal bonds, but eliminated the ability for tax-exempt advance refunding bonds. As a result, local governments have been sidelined when interest rates fall and are unable to capture the savings that could be otherwise reinvested in the community. H.R. 1255 reinstates the ability to issue tax-exempt advance refunding bonds, reducing costs and increasing flexibility in financing investments. Refinancing existing debt through tax-exempt advance refunding is an important cost-saving tool for state and local governments, and Roseville is very supportive of this measure. The next issue is on LIHEAP funding, also at the federal level. The Electric Department recently signed on to the National Energy Utility Affordability Coalition, NEUAC, open letter to the Senate and the House committees on appropriations. The letter urges Congress to provide sufficient funding for LIHEAP in federal fiscal years 2026. LIHEAP is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which helps prevent disconnection of service and relieves the energy burden for those most vulnerable. The large coalition is expected to continue collecting signatures and to send the letter out in April or May. So we've viewed this as a really worthwhile cause and signed on. And then finally, the final federal issue is the American Public Power Association resolution that we recently signed on. Back in February, Roseville traveled to D.C. and attended the APPA's annual legislative rally, which is an advocacy event where we get to talk to federal regulators and legislators out in Washington, D.C. At the rally, Roseville co-sponsored the APPA wildfire resolution, which urges Congress to increase appropriations for wildfire mitigation, suppression, and research. And APPA resolutions really provide the guiding principles for federal advocacy throughout the year for APPA's members. Wildfires pose a risk to electric reliability and financial stability of utilities broadly. And because the issue is front and center in California, we felt it was important to co-sponsor this resolution along with several other California utilities. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Albert, any questions?
I think just probably generally with the changes at the federal level, are we seeing any specific risk yet to any of our current projects that are underway?
Not specifically at electric. The main thing that we've been tracking and are going to be advocating for when we go back in April is to stop cuts to the Power Marketing Administration. So that is the Western Area Power Administration, where we're directly connected to in Roseville. We're mainly concerned about staffing cuts there and how that could potentially affect reliability if we don't have the proper staff manning those agencies. So that's been really a priority topic for us that we've been already pushing back for at the federal level and that we're going to continue to raise noise on when we go back in April.
And is there federal funding coming through for some of the EV projects?
I'm not closely tracking that, but I can follow up with more information.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to note, I mean, I love the advocacy part. I mean, that's so important for us as a city and a region. So I want to thank you and encourage you to keep that as a priority, because I think it's really important for us. On the HR 1255, the tax exempt bonds, when do we have an idea when that might go into effect if it was adopted?
I do not know, but that's something I can follow up with and get more information.
I'm just curious. And then, again, just estimate if you know. If not, this can be a discussion for a later meeting. But do we know or have an estimate of how much it would affect our borrowing costs?
I don't know specifically to Roseville, but I know generally it's a very helpful tool, and we've been advocating for this reinstatement of advanced refunding of bonds for several years now. So the same author is kind of introducing a similar topic this year, this bill. So we're hopeful that we can get across the finish line. I may be able to find some more details of how this would help public power across the board and more specifics about Roseville as well, but I don't have those right now.
That's okay. I was just kind of trying to create a large picture, kind of a thing. So that'd be great.
Okay,
Thank you. Any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Thank you. And at this point, I will open it up to public comments. Seeing none, I will close public comment, and we will move on to item 6.3 and get an update from environmental utilities. Good morning, Noel.
Good morning, Chairman Donza and Vice Mayor Alvord. This morning, I will provide you a brief overview of the state legislation environmental utilities has identified as having a potential impact on the operations of our utilities. Then I will be sharing bills that we are already actively engaging on at the state and federal levels. And I will conclude my presentation with an update on recent activities we've been participating in. At this time, staff has identified over 500 bills that have the potential to impact the operations of our three utilities. While staff are still reviewing bills to determine their impacts and how best to position the city, I will note that we have identified 9 measures that we are already engaging on. Today, I will be presenting on 6 of those bills. As we are reviewing bills, we have identified some trends in the types of bills that have been introduced. Affordability continues to be a hot topic, both from a housing perspective, where we see the legislature limiting our ability to collect connection fees, capacity charges, and impact fees that are vital to our ability to offset the impact of new developments on our community and utilities. Additionally, under the affordability discussion, utility rates continues to be a hot topic. EU staff was part of a small group that crafted legislation to advance the discussion on low-income rate assistance for water customers that is now being sponsored by the California Municipal Utilities Association. And with the recent wildfires in Southern California on everyone's minds, we're seeing legislation being introduced surrounding the role of urban water suppliers in wildfire and disaster events, and the impact of wildfires on the insurance market, affecting both commercial, including local governments, and residential. Extended producer responsibility also continues to be a hot topic. EPR programs place the responsibility for developing appropriate end of useful life disposal pathways onto the manufacturers of products. And of course, source control measures to prohibit this use of certain chemicals like polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, thank you, from being used and allowed to continue to impact our environment continues to be a hot topic. Moving on to specific legislation that we've taken positions on. The first bill is AB 514, which we are supporting. This measure encourages the development of emergency water supplies to support water agencies during times of drought, unplanned service, or supply disruptions. This measure is a reintroduction from last session by Irvine Ranch Water District. We believe this measure may be helpful to Roseville's aquifer storage and recovery program as the region continues to develop the Sacramento Regional Water Bank. Next, Assembly Bill 532 is being sponsored by CMUA and is the water industry's effort to make progress on the decades-long discussion on water rate assistance. Specifically, it would establish a low-income household water assistance program for water agencies serving 3,000 connections or under, and provides express authority to larger water suppliers like Roseville to create a local rate assistance program in a manner that best meets our community's needs. As mentioned previously, staff continues to engage on this issue in the legislature, which is helping to inform our work as we develop a rate assistance program for our customers. We're also supporting SB 31, which proposes updates to the California Water Code to align the uses of recycled water with modern technologies and practices. This measure is being sponsored by the Water Reuse Association, and staff has been participating in their work group that developed this legislation. Staff believes the legislation will be beneficial to Roseville by making it easier to comply with regulations surrounding the use of recycled water. And thank you, Vice Mayor Alvord, for sharing this next measure with staff. The next bill is SB 45, which would, beginning January 1st of 2027, require a plastic beverage container cap to stay attached to the container after it is opened. This is modeled after the 2018 EU directive mandating all caps and lids remain attached to their containers during the product's intended use stage. We have worked internally to determine that this measure does not pose any known concerns or risks to our equipment or for the post-collection and recycling processes and market. We are currently supporting this measure through the California Product Stewardship Council. This measure was actually heard yesterday in the Senate Environmental Quality Committee, where it received broad support and was also met with some opposition. It made it out of committee on a 5-2 vote. The next bill, SB 72, is another reintroduction from last session and is being sponsored again by CMUA. We had a support and amend position when the legislation was introduced. This measure would modernize the California Water Plan by setting statewide water supply targets with an interim goal of achieving 9 million acre-feet of additional water capacity by 2040. The measure also prescribes how the state can achieve this goal. Roseville and others sought clarifying language in the bill that requires the state to not simply rely on conservation mandates to achieve this goal. We are happy to report that the clarifying language was accepted, and we are now in full support. The last bill I will be covering this morning at the state level is SB 350, which would create a statewide water rate assistance program for low-income water and wastewater customers. This is a revamp of SB 222 from 22. I know, lots of twos. We had an oppose unless amended position on that bill. It was ultimately vetoed by the governor because there was no funding source included to implement that bill. This year, again, we are taking an oppose unless amended position on 350. As currently drafted, staff have a number of concerns regarding the potential costs to local agencies to implement this state program and enforcement measures by the Attorney General. Not to mention, there's still no funding source identified. This measure was also up in Senate Environmental Quality Committee yesterday, and it made it out of committee on a 6-1 vote. At the federal level, Roseville is engaging in conversations on House Joint Resolution 18, which expresses the House's disapproval of the recently adopted lead and copper rule improvements regulation. Under the Congressional Review Act, Congress may review and disapprove federal agency rules within a 60-day window. Should Congress act on this bill, the lead and copper rule improvement, which I will refer to as LCRI, regulation would be revoked, and the recently adopted lead and copper rule revision, which I refer to as LCRR, regulation would prevail. While we are supportive of the goals of these regulations, they are a one-size-fits-all approach for every water system in every state. California has been out front on the issue and has passed laws prohibiting the use of lead in fixtures and pipes, requiring removal of all lead service lines within our systems, and required testing of schools and daycare facilities. Roseville has expressed concerns during the process of the adoption of both the LCRR and LCRI, as they require us to again test schools and take daycare sites, but also enter our customers' private property to pothole and visually inspect the customer's privately owned service lines to determine if they are lead or not. Staff is even more concerned with the LCRI because it requires additional costly verifications and assurances for work we have already done that proves we do not have any lead service lines within our system. This issue is actually one of EU's critical concerns in this year's LEDGE platform. We would like to work with US EPA to develop a pathway for agencies like ours who, based on a specific set of criteria, can receive an off-ramp to the onerous investigations when they have proven already that our systems do not contain lead service lines and continually have non-detects in their ongoing testing of our water. Moving on to government affairs activities, this year has already been busy, and we would like to share some of the activities we've been engaging in so far. Last month, EU's government relations team and water utility manager visited Washington, D.C. for the California Association of Sanitation Agencies and the Association of California Water Agencies federal summits, and visited with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Senator Schiff, and Congressman Kiley. While we received an update on the Inflation Reduction Act rebate program, we have submitted a $29 million tax rebate for our energy recovery project and upgrades at the Pleasant Grove wastewater treatment plant. We learned that for those tax rebates submitted in 2023, they were sent out in the June-July timeframe of 2024. So barring any unforeseen issues, we are expecting to receive our rebate in about June or July of this year. Staff is continuing to monitor this program to ensure it does not get wrapped up into the budget cuts and those discussions. We are cautiously optimistic at this time. At the Aqua Summit, the California congressional delegation spoke to water agencies and touched on the most pressing issues for California water, most notably the outcomes from recent wildfires in Los Angeles, the need for more water storage, and further investments in infrastructure. They highlighted the need for collaboration among water agencies, the administration, and Congress to find solutions to address California's unique water needs. Additionally, we had productive conversations on our raw water conveyance project, which is a joint project with Placer County Water Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers. We received a $21 million authorization in '22, and we are working with the Corps to execute a project partnership agreement and letter report and to obtain funding for the first increment of work. At this time, the total project is estimated to be approximately $154 million. Working through the environmental infrastructure program at the Army Corps, there is a 75-25 cost split, so significant potential savings for our customers and ratepayers. Also, EU attended the Sun City Roseville Government Affairs Committee and provided an overview of the introduced legislation and provided them a recap of our recent trip to DC. And then the last one, Amber already covered, we participated in the California Municipal Utilities Association Capital Day. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Noel. Vice Mayor Albert, any questions?
I had a question. A couple of the bills address low-income water rate assistance. And one seems funded, and we're supporting it, and one's not funded. And we're opposing, but it made it out of committee, it sounds like.
Yes.
What if they both moved forward? Like, what would that look like? Do you know?
Yes. Thank you for the question. We're doing a delicate balance. 532, which is a bill that Roseville, along with the several others, has written and proposed, and our association is sponsoring. It splits up the discussion on rate assistance. There's a lot of agencies that already have water rate assistance programs, and those are the larger. And then there's another pot that there are some very small agencies. What we've found in the decades-long conversation, the really hard to address issue is all of those small agencies, because the various ways that they've been introducing these programs is it's the local levels that have to fund and pay. Last year, for example, a bill was introduced that placed it on, would have made each agency create a program and then have a opt-out program where we would have automatically had to place a voluntary contribution on everybody's bill. And residents would have to see it, know about it, to opt out of it. So in those conversations, especially that one, when you're talking about those really small water agencies, they don't have the customer base to, one, afford it, and most of those smaller agencies tend to not have most of them are in disadvantaged communities, so they wouldn't be able to even have the customers. Most of the customers that would be receiving a benefit would also be receiving a tax-ish kind of measure on their bill. So what we tried to do was, for those larger agencies, provide us the assurances necessary to create a program that benefits the unique needs of our customers and creates a program for those smaller agencies, the 3,000 and under connections, that the state would run, because the locals don't have the customer base to really stand up that program. Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at those two bills, we're kind of looking at it, obviously we like 532 the best. As we're going through the conversations, what we would love to see is the SB 350 kind of be dovetailed or worked into a complement. So 532 could potentially move forward to address the large systems, and then 350 would be the bill that would handle the smaller systems.
Okay.
Does that kind of answer?
How many connections do we have?
Oh my goodness,
Or,
we
like,
don't,
just
we're in the larger category.
I assumed we were in the larger category.
Yes.
Over 3,000.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
No, that was helpful. That was very detailed. Thank you.
Sorry. There's lots up here.
Yeah. Great presentation, thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
I just had one question, much like the ADA on the IT side, for our residents. On the SB 31, the water quality recycled bill, what are some examples of the technologies and practices that we might be looking to implement?
It isn't anything that we may be changing. It's just how we're already cleaning our water. So one example is you can't have any runoff of recycled water. Otherwise, it's a violation. It would expand and allow recycled water to be used in parks in closer proximity to things like picnic benches and things like that.
So it's not necessarily new, it's just kind of tidying up what's already there?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. And then it is really good to see this lead and copper rule continuing. It feels like we've been talking about this since the entire time I've been on this commission, but I'm glad to see where it's going and that we're in a support position on it. So thank you for that update. I will move us to public comment. Any public comment? I will close public comment. Thank you. Rob, I'll kick it back to you. Any final thoughts?
No final thoughts outside of the next meeting for the Law and Regulation Committee meeting is May 15th, where we will continue to review priority legislation to date.
Wow. All right, sounds good. City Attorney, any updates or comments from you?
No reports.
That's always good.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Vice Mayor?
No, this is my first meeting, so I really appreciate the format and all the information.
Cool.
A lot of good stuff to think through.
Definitely. All right, we will stand adjourned until May 15th. Thank you, everyone.